There is something your grandmother kept in a small jar on her dresser, something she rubbed into her face every single night, something that kept her skin soft and smooth into her 70s. And in the late 1970s, the government effectively made it disappear. Not because it was dangerous, because it worked too well and too cheaply for an industry that was about to build a multi-billion-dollar empire selling you the alternative. It cost a few dollars. It came from a farm, not a factory. And by the time the rules were finished being written, the simplest, most effective skin treatment in American history had been quietly erased from store shelves, replaced with petroleum byproducts and cheap industrial oils dressed up in beautiful jars and sold back to you at 50 times the price. A woman I met still makes it herself, in her kitchen, exactly the way her grandmother taught her. She is 74. Her skin will stop you mid-sentence. Let me tell you what it is, what really happened in 1978, and why it works on your skin too. Even if you're already 60, even if the lines are already there, the thing your grandmother used was tallow, rendered beef fat. I know how that sounds the first time you hear it. Fat. On your face. The beauty industry has spent decades training you to flinch at that word, to believe that anything from an animal is dirty, primitive, something to be scrubbed off rather than rubbed in. But for most of human history, across nearly every culture that herded animals, rendered fat was the skin treatment. It was the balm on the farmhouse shelf. It was what women used on weathered hands, chapped faces, dry winter skin, and the fine lines that came with age. It wasn't a trend, it was simply what worked, passed down so many generations that nobody even thought of it as a beauty product. It was just what you put on your skin. Here's why it works, and it's not folklore, it's chemistry. Your skin produces its own oil, called sebum, and the entire reason your skin stays soft and plump when you're young is that this oil keeps the barrier sealed and the moisture in. As you age, and especially after 40, your skin produces dramatically less of it. The barrier thins, moisture escapes faster than your skin can hold it, and every time that water evaporates, the fine lines deepen and the texture goes creepy. Now here is the remarkable part. The fatty acid profile of tallow is strikingly close to the fatty acid profile of human sebum, the very oil your skin has stopped making. So when you put tallow on aging skin, you are not putting something foreign on it. You are replacing almost exactly what time has taken away. The skin recognizes it. It absorbs cleanly. It rebuilds the barrier instead of sitting greasy on top of it. And on top of that, tallow naturally carries the fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, the same nutrients your skin uses to repair itself, and the same family of vitamin A that the $90 retinols are built around, except delivered gently, the way nature packaged it. A few dollars of rendered fat does what a shelf of expensive bottles spends a fortune trying to imitate. So what actually happened in 1978? This is the part nobody explains. The FDA did not declare tallow poisonous. It didn't drag jars off shelves with a hazard label. What happened was quieter and far more effective. Through the 1970s, the FDA tightened the line between a cosmetic and a drug, and the rule was simple but devastating. If a product claimed to change the structure of your skin, to remove wrinkles, to reverse aging, to do anything beyond sit on the surface and make you smell nice, it was no longer a cosmetic. It was now a drug. And a drug requires years of trials and a fortune in approvals before you're allowed to say a single word about what it does. Think about who that destroys and who it protects. A grandmother's tallow balm, or the small company selling a simple rendered fat cream for a few dollars, could no longer legally say the thing everyone already knew, that it softened wrinkles and restored aging skin, saying it became illegal. The cheap, effective ancestral product couldn't afford the new drug approval gauntlet, so it had to go silent, drop the claim, and fade out of the anti-aging conversation entirely. Meanwhile, the large corporations, the ones with legal departments and laboratories, simply rewrote their labels into a careful new language of appearance of and look of, pivoted to cheap petroleum-derived and industrial seed oil bases that they could mass-produce for pennies, and built the modern luxury skincare market on top of the rubble. The knowledge wasn't lost, it was regulated into silence, and then the silence was filled by an industry that had every reason to keep your grandmother's jar off the shelf. That's the trade you never agreed to. They took the thing that matched your own skin, that your great-grandmother used that cost almost nothing, and they replaced it with byproducts of the oil refinery, scented and whipped and sold to you at a markup that would embarrass a jeweler. So here is how you use it, and it's almost insultingly simple. At night, after cleansing on slightly damp skin, you take a small amount of whipped tallow balm. A little goes a long way. Warm it between your fingertips and press it gently upward and outward across your face, down the neck, onto the backs of the hands, the two zones that age fastest and that nearly everyone ignores. Press it in, don't scrub, that's it. You can buy a quality grass-fed tallow balm for a few dollars an ounce, and a jar lasts months, which works out to pennies a night. Or, and this is what your grandmother actually did, you can render it yourself from a few dollars of beef suet from the butcher, melted low and strained until it's clean and odorless, and you'll have enough to last most of a year for the price of a coffee. One detail matters enormously, and the people selling you the expensive version will never mention it: quality. You want tallow from grass-fed, well-raised cattle, rendered clean. The fatty acid profile and the vitamin content depend on it. A good tallow is creamy, mild, and absorbs beautifully. A cheap, poorly rendered one can smell off and sit heavy. Get that one thing right and you have, for almost nothing, the closest match to your own skin that exists. Before I tell you about the woman I met, and the one thing she said that I genuinely haven't been able to stop thinking about, do me a favor right now and tell me in the comments, did your mother or your grandmother keep a jar of something on her dresser, some homemade balm or cream nobody could quite name that she swore by? Because I think thousands of you are about to remember something you'd completely forgotten, and I want to read every one of them. Drop it below. Now stay with me, because the next part is the one that actually matters most. Here is the honesty, because you will not get it from anyone selling you a jar. I am not a dermatologist, and I want to be precise about that 1978 story, because precision is exactly what these companies count on you not having. The FDA did not ban tallow for being unsafe. Tallow is safe. It's fat, very close to your own skin's oil, used on skin for thousands of years. What changed in that era was the rules around what a product is allowed to claim, and that regulatory shift, combined with the industry's pivot to cheaper bases, is what pushed the simple stuff out of the anti-aging market. That's the real mechanism, and it's actually more damning than a dramatic ban, because it's how the cheap, effective thing gets silenced without anyone ever having to prove it didn't work. Now, the practical caveats: tallow is rich, and if your skin is very acne-prone or oily, it can be too heavy and clog pores, so you patch test it on your jaw for a few nights first. Source it well. Quality is everything. And if you have a skin condition or any sensitivity, talk to an actual dermatologist before you change your routine. I'd rather tell you all of that plainly than pretend there's no nuance, because the companies selling you the refinery byproduct in a frosted jar will never mention the nuance either. They just won't mention your grandmother's jar at all. Now, the woman. I met her at a farmer's market, of all places, selling small jars of something pale and creamy with no fancy label. I noticed her skin before I noticed her table. Soft even, lit from within. The kind of skin that looks comfortable rather than constructed. She told me she was 74. I asked her twice. She laughed and told me she's made the same balm in her own kitchen since she was a young woman, rendering the fat low and slow exactly the way her grandmother taught her on the farm where she grew up. No counter, no brand, no 10-step routine. One jar every night for over 50 years. Then she said the thing I keep coming back to. She said the women she knew who chased the newest cream every season were always starting over, always introducing something new, always interrupting the one thing that actually works, which is doing the simple thing the same way for decades until the years do what no single product ever can. She said her secret was never the tallow. It was that she found something that cost almost nothing and matched her own skin so well that she never had a reason to stop. Consistency, she said, is the ingredient. The jar means nothing without the 50 years. The industry can sell you a new miracle every month. It cannot sell you 50 years of pressing the same cheap balm into your skin on the night you're tired and don't feel like it. That is the one thing they could never put in a jar, and it is the only thing that has ever actually worked. She handed me a jar before I left, a few dollars. I checked what a barrier-restoring balm with the same basic idea costs at a department store later that week, and I genuinely had to read it twice. So here is your routine, one more time so you have it. At night, on clean, slightly damp skin, press a small amount of quality grass-fed tallow balm gently upward across your face, your neck, and the backs of your hands. In the morning, sunscreen every day, no exceptions, because the sun is responsible for up to 90% of visible aging, and no balm on earth undoes what an unprotected afternoon writes into your skin. That's the whole thing. A few dollars, pennies a night, the closest match to your own skin that exists. The same jar that sat on your grandmother's dresser before someone decided it was more profitable for you to forget it. Start tonight with what you can buy from a butcher or order by the weekend. You did not fail at skincare. You weren't foolish or vain for spending money trying to take care of yourself. That instinct was right. You were just handed an incomplete picture on purpose by an industry that profited enormously from making sure the cheapest, oldest, most effective thing got quietly written out of the story. Your grandmother wasn't behind the times. She was holding the answer the whole time, in a small jar on her dresser. Now you have it too. I want you to do one thing for me in the comments. Tell me your age, and tell me one beauty secret your mother or grandmother had that you were always told was old-fashioned. I read every comment, and I want to build a real record of this knowledge across every age and every skin type, so the next woman who finds this video sees it backed by real people instead of an ad. If you're the kind of woman who's tired of being managed by an industry that profits from what you don't know, subscribe to the Beauty Armor. Not for me. Subscribe because there's a growing group of women taking back the knowledge that was always cheap, always simple, and always quietly regulated, rebranded, or shamed off the shelf so they'd reach for the expensive version instead.